Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, because you could be anywhere in this world. We thank you for joining us tonight for a conversation with two amazing women. We thank you for liking and sharing this post each week. We thank you for just committing to yourself and to your family the discussions that are important for generations to come. So we thank you for sitting in. My name is Shenita Connolly, and I would like to personally welcome you to tonight's show. And we're talking about medical matters. And just a little background of how I got to this place. 5 years ago, I lost my husband on June 30th, 2015. He had a heart attack and lived for 21 days. And I am a widow of 5 years. And so God said to me, after being in a dark place for months after he passed, that I had to live and I had to share my story in an effort to help others avoid what I had gone through. So that is where I am today. I've decided to live a vibrant life in spite of my journey. Life with Shenita is simply that. It is in place to help others to live their life in spite of the challenges that they face. And so I hope by me sharing my journey, by me living my life, choosing to live my life, because it is a choice, that you will be inspired to continue to live your life in spite of the challenges that you face. This series that we've been on, this mini series, Is Your House in Order, is near and dear to my heart, because when my husband had his heart attack, we did not have all of our affairs in order. And so God said, share your story. And after I was over the embarrassment of not having my affairs in order, God spoke to me with the book titled, Is Your House in Order? Is a question for every person to really think about. Is my will in place? Is my medical advance directive in place? Are all my banking matters in place? All those things that will make a smoother transition when life's inevitable happens. And so over the last 6 weeks, we have talked about a host of conversations or topics. And I hope that it has really inspired you all to move forward to get in your house in order. My book is available on Amazon. And I have copies myself. And so during this mini series, I am offering it instead of $19.99. I'm offering it for $14.99, which is a $5 discount for the 5 years that I have been a widow. I want to make sure that it is affordable and that people have the opportunity to get a copy. And if they don't need it for themselves, that they will bless someone else with the copy, particularly people who have a tough time talking about this conversation, talking about death, which is something we all know that we're going to have to experience at some point in our life. So I'm hoping that these conversations will inspire you, will motivate you, will equip you, will empower you to move forward in getting your house in order. So please like and share the broadcast during the show to enter the drawing. We want to thank Dr. Indy Jones tonight for her donation for the drawing. Dr. Jones is an author also, and she'll share that when she comes on. I am so excited to have her. I am so excited to have Chaplain Jackie Griffin with us. These two amazing women will share some important information as you prepare this part of your affairs, getting your affairs in order. So I'm going to bring them both in because I'm just excited to have them both at the same time. Typically, it's just me and the subject matter expert, but I think that they're both subject matter experts. So I am going to bring them both in to join the conversation, and then they will introduce themselves. So in the meantime, please like and share the broadcast so that others will be blessed as well. So I will bring in Dr. Indy Jones. Welcome, Dr. Jones. How are you?
Good. How are you, Shenita?
Wonderful. Welcome, and so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. Very excited
Yes,
to be here.
yes. And so I'm going to bring Chaplain Jackie Griffin in, and then we're going to start off with the introductions, and I'm going to come back to you in just a moment.
Okay.
Good evening, Shenita.
Hey, Chaplain Griffin, how are you?
I'm doing well, and Dr. Jones, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, so I'm so excited to have you wonderful, beautiful women on this show tonight. And I'm just elated. So I'm gonna just allow you guys to introduce yourselves. And I'll start with you, Dr. Jones. Just share with the audience whatever you'd like to share about yourself.
Okay. I'm Dr. Indy Jones. I'm a board certified internist. So I'm like your primary care doctor, but only when you're sick enough to be in the hospital. Okay. I practice just north of Atlanta, Georgia, in the Gwinnett County area. And when I'm not in the hospital taking care of patients, men and women, I am doing what God has put on my heart as my purpose and passion, and that's empowering women to take care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit. So I'm a wellness coach for women. And I too, as Shenita mentioned, wrote a book, and there was some life changes for me. It's after I went through a divorce 6 years ago now, to be exact. And there was just some pains and some realities and some reflections that I had to do. And I knew that there were plenty of women out there who had the same issues that I have, and whether they're divorced, single, never been married, whatever the case is. But there was just some realities that came to my consciousness, and that God was working with me and told me that I needed to share my message. So that's how the book was birthed, and that's when I became a wellness coach for women.
Awesome.
That's
awesome. Yes, she is.
Well, I am Jackie Griffin, and I am a certified clinical chaplain. I also serve as reserve chaplain for the Air Force Reserves, as well as minister for one of the local churches. Outside of ministry within the walls of the hospital, the walls of the church, and outside of the fields, serving, the airmen. I'm a wife of soon to be 16 years, a mother of 3 children. I have 2 boys and a daughter. My older 2 are 2 boys, Kenneth and Antonio. They're ages 15 and 12. So, I'm right in that hormonal stage in high school and middle school. And then my husband and I have a 7-month-old daughter. Back in September last year, canceling. So,
Awesome.
Thank you. It's truly a pleasure.
Yes, so I am so excited to have you ladies talk about medical matters, and particularly about the advanced medical directive. And so we're going to just jump right into the conversation, and I'm going to ask the first question is simply, what is a advanced medical directive? And I'd like for both of you to share your thoughts on that. Dr. Indy?
Okay, so an advanced medical directive is a document that pretty much uh, outlines what your end of life wishes are. It's a scenario where you are not able to make decisions for yourself. You may be unconscious, on a ventilator. There could be other issues affecting your cognitive abilities to make decisions for yourself. So it's very important to have this document in place prior to you getting to that point where you can express your wishes to your family members. And so it would have to do with very important information as to your medical care, and they're very specific. Artificial feedings, like I said, whether or not to resuscitate, whether or not to put you on a ventilator, what circumstances surrounding that. So those are the types of things where you express what it is that you want done or not done in the case that you can't make those decisions for yourself.
Awesome. And I like to just kind of share, because I started out saying, how did I get here? How did I get here being a widow and losing my husband? And the night when he had his heart attack on June 30th, 2015, and he was in ICU at Emory Midtown. And I remember them coming in saying that there was, very little brain activity. And I was very hopeful and prayerful that in time he would recover. And the number 21 was a number that was given to me, and I used that number in terms of weeks. And what I found out is I thought that it would have given him time to recover, but really it was for me. And I wish that we had had that advanced medical directive, which could have directed me versus me deciding for him what to do, that it would have been in writing. So that was my latest experience with that, with not having it in place. So, Chaplain Griffin, anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. I'll piggyback a little bit on Dr. Jones. So when I encounter families or encounter individuals, I explain to them that advanced directive is a healthcare document. Healthcare wishes, basically how you like to be cared for in case of an emergent situation arises and you're unconscious or unaware or not able to make decisions for yourself. It gives you an opportunity to start having conversations with your family, your friends, and your loved ones. And I pretty much go into, it's 4 sections to the document. So I go in and explain to them which I think we're going to touch a little bit later as far as, just a quick synopsis, a healthcare agent, someone they choose that they trust. And it's very important that they have someone that they trust that's going to make the best decisions on their behalf. But what the document is basically trusting that this individual is going to follow through with their decisions that they have already discussed. Mm-hmm. And it's already written on the document. Then section 2 is basically treatment preferences. How do you want to be careful? What are your plans? Have you thought about cremation or burial? Have you thought about autopsy? Have you thought about donating your body to an organization? It's very in depth when it comes to those questions that we're typically just randomly we won't have the answer to unless it's you're encouraged to go ahead and have those discussions. Section 3 gives you an opportunity to choose someone to make decisions in case the state gets involved. You can choose your healthcare agent or you can choose a whole new representative. And then section 4 is the section that, the person's signature is witness. And so to solidify that legal document. And then at that point, typically give them an opportunity, make a copy for them. Once everything is filled out and completed, there's no questions. They've signed, it's been witnessed, then it's copied. They get a copy. Their loved one that they want to make the, follow through on their decisions actually gets a copy. And then there's a copy that stays with the hospital.
And it reminds me of each time I've gone to the hospital to have a procedure, and I remember them asking me this: do you have an advanced medical directive or a living will? And so it is important for us to have this conversation. And Dr. Indy, this is another question that came in, was why should people express their wishes about healthcare in this way? And you kind of touched on it a little bit, Chaplain Griffin. But why? I mean, what's the consequences? And I
Sure.
shared a little bit about, my husband, but why should we express our wishes in this way?
I think I'll just preface it by saying, and I'm sure you would agree that within the African American community in particular, we don't like to talk about these things. Okay. It may seem kind of morbid, but in reality, it is vitally important, because what happens is in situations where these things haven't been discussed, it creates a tremendous amount of undue stress on the person who's now put in this position to have to make the decision. Because, by default, it's going to be the spouse. If there's no spouse, a child, they're going to go down the line for the next of kin to look to that person to make decisions. And it's stressful enough, you're a clinical condition that you're in, and that person is going through the grieving process. They may be in a state of shock, anger, denial. And then on top of all of that, you're asking them to make these decisions that, had they been made prior to, it would take away that extra stress and strain on that person. And at the same time, again, honor your wishes, what you would want done or not done.
Excellent. Excellent response. Chaplain?
Yeah, Dr. Jones said that very well. And just to piggyback off of that, the person that's actively dying, or they're basically, say for instance, they're on life support already. What is the next decision? And so they reach out to the next of kin to make the decision. And instead of saying, we didn't have that conversation, or I don't know, I don't know what he or she would want. This gives you the opportunity to have the conversation. Play, through my scenario, or just having a conversation as, what would you want? How would you want to be cared for? What would this look like for you? Would you want life support? Would you want them to do everything? And or would you just want to go ahead and die naturally? Those are important questions, because it can either add to the suffering. The grief is going to be there regardless. The shock is going to be there. The anxiety, the range of emotions are feeling overwhelming. For some people, it can kick in anger. So with all those emotions happening and having to decide for this loved one, you can be stuck in the fact that I just don't know what to do. I don't know how the person would want to live, and not really knowing the questions to ask. Is there will this person have a quality of life if we keep them on a ventilator? What would that quality of life look like for him or her? Is there brain activity? So those are other questions that can help loved ones make a decision. But again, if you've never had the discussion, you don't know. So the advanced directive gives opportunities to have a conversation and see what you would or would not want, even if it makes you uncomfortable. It's not something that you would have to sit down and decide all at one time, but at least start the conversation and maybe do it in, perhaps in sections while you're healthy. Because when it comes to a situation, life or death, an emergent situation, that time is no longer there for you to, to just sit and try to figure it out.
And I will chime in with some of my personal experiences, particularly when my husband was in ICU for those 3 weeks and on a ventilator. And at one point, all of the family was together and talking about, what the doctors had just shared with us. And I had to have this conversation with my siblings. And I remember us having a conversation over the phone. And my baby brother reminded me, because this was in July and we had just came from Louisiana in May. And while we were in Louisiana, my husband, we were having a conversation with friends and family. We had that conversation and he said, if something happens to me and I am incapacitated, I don't want to live like that. Of course, I had forgotten that. So during that time, we had that conversations with my siblings, and my baby brother reminded me, Winston said, He does not want to live like that, because the conversation came up in the hospital about long-term care. Well, what would that have been like if I had made that decision to take him to a long-term care facility just because I'm being selfish? Although some of the family members thought I was being selfish for those 21 days, but I felt like it was something God said to do, and I did that 21 days. And on that 21st day, we took him off the respirator and he was gone within seconds. But had we had this advanced medical directive, we may have been at 1 day. We may have been at 2 days. We may have been at no days. And so I really do wish, and like one of you said, you're grieving, and now you've got to make decisions, and you're not even thinking straight.
No.
And so, I'm just hoping that people will understand the importance of this document. And it says advanced, meaning doing before we need it.
Yes, it has it in its name.
That's why we're having this conversation about getting our house in order, getting our affairs in order. I'm hoping that this dialogue will continue long after the mini-series is over, and people will have family meetings and start talking about what they desire, and more importantly, putting it in writing.
I have a thought, Shenita. One thing that I see, and I've seen in my personal situation with my mom passing, that is, what she discussed with me, which we talked was very little in her generation. I think they didn't like having these discussions, right? And then also with family members, I would just encourage you, when you're doing your advanced medical directive, if your medical condition, if you may be healthy when you're making this advanced directive, but God forbid something happens, we're talking about you being incapacitated, but sometimes that could be a temporary thing, something reversible. Other times you may be diagnosed with a terminal disease, like a terminal cancer, end stage, where short of a miracle, we don't expect you to come back to a quality of life. So with my mom, why would I resuscitate her and bring her back to more pain and suffering, where her organs are shutting down? She's not there mentally, she's in pain. And so when you think about that, even for family members where they may see that, they still, because they're grieving, they're holding on to what was said originally. So you want to update that advanced directive if there's a change in your, overall health. And or just even having those conversations, if you don't get to update it, just play out the scenarios. Just say, well, hey, as of today, if something were to happen to me, I'm young and I'm vibrant. Revive me, but something's changed, in life. And you have to say, what are you bringing the patient back to? If you're putting this feeding tube in the person and the organs are shutting down, when you go through the stages of death, there's different stages. And sometimes patients have this last hurrah. So family members will hold on to a thread, like they open their eyes, they did this or they did that. And there are times where patients will perk up and start talking to you. You think they're, coming back, but it's a phase that they do that and then they're gone. We see this all the time. So family members think they're starving their loved one to death. So I think there's a lot of education, I know that needs to take place. I know the primary care doctors, are already taxed enough just to get through your visits, to deal with your annual exam or whatever your problem is for the day. But I think these conversations really need to happen, not just once, not just twice, but just continue the narrative and make those necessary updates as your life situation would dictate for you to update.
Absolutely. Chaplain?
I agree, because again, Dr. Jones, you said it all. Life happens, our medical conditions change. And what you may have wanted when you were in a healthy state, you may not want that again if you're critically ill or a disease is taking over your body. Because again, just to reiterate, but if you're diagnosed with cancer and it's already in the latter stages and you have a cardiac arrest, being a heart attack, and you have that decision there for your family to make. Do we continue to let this person live, your loved one live on a ventilator? Not to mention how aggressive the resuscitation can be and how much damage in itself to revive you and pressure it can cause on your body. And for families just to recognize and realize and be educated that they're suffering in that. And is it necessary, especially in their condition? Do you want to continue their suffering, or do you want to allow them to go peacefully and end their suffering? You know, 'cause then again, who are you doing this for? Yourself, or are you doing this for your loved one? So again, I think keeping that at the forefront, even through the education, that you're doing this for your loved one, not for yourself. Because they're the one that's feeling it and going through it. It's just unfortunately in a condition they can't express or talk. So
and it's funny you mentioned the resuscitation, because when my mom went into cardiac arrest in 2001, I was in the room, and I remember them turning to me and saying, "Do you want us to try again?" And I said, "Yes." And after I saw it being demonstrated, I said, "Not again," because you're right. It is the worst thing to see somebody, you know, it was bad. So I think it's important for us to talk about this topic, to make sure that we have something in plan. And as Dr. Jones said, make sure you update your medical directive periodically. Have the family meetings. I know it's tough, but it's necessary, as we always say. And then the next question that came in says, who should I choose to serve as my healthcare proxy? And I know you kind of mentioned that earlier, Dr. Jones, but let's go into it a little bit deeper when we think about who do we choose to stand in the gap for us? Because that's what I feel like we're doing, standing in the gap. Somebody's standing in the gap for us.
Someone who has your best interest at heart. And the thing is, families, you know, we grew up on the sitcoms with, you know, the Brady Bunch and, you know, all these other families who, you know, have a perfect life. But each family has its own dynamics and issues. And, you know, you'd be surprised. It may be a patient who says, I don't want my spouse making decisions. You just never know. Or maybe they're separated. You know, I want my child. You know, my wife is crazy. You know, it's just you really have to say, who do you think will honor as best as you can tell, and will make a rational decision for you, even though logically you would think if you have a spouse, child, you know, sibling, that, you know, going down the line in that order. But based on your family dynamics, it's not always the case that you may go in that order.
Wow. You're right. Because I had conversations with
have you seen some crazy stuff like that?
She actually, have you seen some things like that happen?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, and then I've also seen the positive side. So the family dynamics is just, that's a subject by itself.
Right.
You know, especially when it comes to the grieving process and a loved one is dying, because you got everyone coming from everywhere that has a voice. And then those that are intimate with that person may feel like, well, where have you been the past such and such years? And I've been here doing everything, and now you're coming taking over. So that's the negative side. But on the positive side, I've also seen it where the patient is like, I just don't want my loved one, my wife or my husband, to be burdened with this decision. Or maybe she's not strong enough to make this decision, so it's best that my child makes the decision. Or I also seen it whereas another family member is a healthcare professional, and they feel like they understand the language better.
Right.
You know, everybody's not privy to have that, but just to share just a little bit of variety there that I have seen, well, because they know the language a little bit better. I think it's best for him or her to do it. Or I've also seen, just as I mentioned earlier, I don't want my spouse to suffer anymore. This is already a tough decision. So I have assigned this individual who I know will follow through with my wishes and honor my wishes and make the decision, you know, when the time comes. But it's very, very important to make sure you have someone that you trust and you know will honor your wishes. Because when that moment comes, they can flip the switch. And because they're the healthcare agent or the POA, power of attorney, their wishes at that time now becomes honored.
Right.
So it can be a little tricky, but it's important that you have the best person that you believe will honor your wishes when that moment comes.
Yeah.
And I have, chosen my oldest daughter, and she's in the medical field, and we talk about this often. And maybe a little bit later, I'll read just a snippet from my living will that I had done in 2015, and it's really time to update it. Although I think it's still inclusive of everything, but the whole packet needs to be revisited to make sure that I don't need to make any changes. So the next question that was posed was, what should I tell my healthcare representative? So as I was about to say, I've had this conversation with my oldest daughter. They've seen the documents. We've talked about different scenarios. And so they need to know where to find them, I think. I think they need to understand what it says in its totality. So when the time comes, there's no question. So if you guys would chime in on that for me, what should we tell our representatives?
Well, I'll chime in, and just for clarity purposes. Now, you mentioned a living will. So even though there's some language in there that mentions, the advancce directive also, as your living will, the advancce directive is only going to cover your healthcare wishes, how you want to be cared for in an emergent situation. And then there's a section in there in case the state gets involved, who would you want to, represent you in that scenario? However, there's been people that come into the hospital looking for a living will, but a living will is, a document, a legal document that is done through the law office. And there's been instances where, because the legal, that document covers more details and more information, a living will, than just your healthcare wishes. So there's a separate entity with that one. So if you're in a hospital and they're offering you an advanced directive, just know that that's only going to focus on your healthcare wishes, as far as the cremation, the burial, the life support, the tubing with nutrition, or allow natural death to occur. But when it comes to the living will, that's a separate entity where people have to go into the law office with an attorney to get that completed.
And so, Doc, what would you add to that in terms of telling your representative that you have selected to be your proxy?
I guess you have to make sure that they're a willing participant, and just, ask them what concerns that they may have about it. Are there any reservations that they may have? Because it's a big responsibility. It really is. So even if here's the thing, there may be a conflict. You can choose your proxy, your healthcare proxy, because you trust that they will honor your wishes, but there could be some conflict. They may not necessarily 100% agree with what you want to do, but you're going to have to ask them, are you comfortable with this, even if it's not necessarily what you would do or what you think I should do? That's an issue too, because there are scenarios where family members will do the right thing and say, I have to honor their wishes, but there's some conflict there. So maybe just have those discussions about how comfortable they are with, what your wishes are.
And to piggyback and to add a little more, that proxy that you select doesn't have to be the only person. He or she doesn't have to make the decisions or go at it alone. Because on the advanced directives, it gives you 3 sections on there for a healthcare proxy, being that the very first person that you select is the primary proxy. However, you can add 2 other persons along with that to help that primary person make the decision and have someone as far as the support to be at their side, and also, their voice along with the patient's voice, having more than one person to come together as, team effort and making those decisions and carrying them through. Because they may need some coaching up, may need that support, may need that comfort. And so that way it's not all on that one individual as well. And along with what Dr. Jones said, making sure that they're a willing participant.
Right. We select them, but we don't know, and they're not willing. Like, I don't want to do that.
Right. Do you
I'm
feel
gonna say that
comfortable
wrong.
doing this?
Right.
And
They-
knowing they don't have to do it alone. You don't
Right.
have to make the decision alone. You know, you can choose another individual to come alongside that individual, and then they can make it collectively.
Right.
And I
You
know
know,
they, of course, when my husband was in ICU, they came to me, and I remember coming to my husband's sons and asking them, what they wanted us to do after,
Mhm.
a few weeks. And they were like, my dad wouldn't want to live like that.
Mhm.
And so on that 21st day, we took him off the respirator and he was gone within seconds. So I
Mhm.
realized those 21 days were not for his recovery.
Right.
They were
Right.
really for me,
Mhm.
and me not knowing that, but me hoping, trusting, believing in God for a miracle, but that wasn't the state. And so
Right.
so I had to go through that process to really learn that. So that's why, this topic is really important for us to have,
Mhm.
so that people will begin to have the conversation. They will begin to put the documents in place for their family members to know that they're in place. As Dr. Indy said, I'm a willing
Mhm.
participant and I know where to find the documents
Yeah.
when the
And then
time comes.
and
And I
then you
like
can
what
have
you
that.
said. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I like what you said about a team.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
A
Because that
team
helps.
effort. 'Cause when you're meeting with the doctor or the doctor and the doctor's assistant, when they're coming in to speak with you as the primary person, you're dealing with your emotions. Not to say that the team member isn't either, but with you being the primary person and don't know the connection or the relation to the patient, 9 out of 10, I'm sure that you're not hearing everything.
That's
And
right.
that's another piece that comes into play in the family meetings, that primary person is so overwhelmed with emotions. A lot of time he or she isn't hearing everything. So if you have a team member that's along with you, that's supportive and that's there for you, then they can be your ears. So what you missed and didn't hear or even didn't understand, they can give it to you in a language, that you all already share, that will help you understand, to just soften the tone for you or just get you to the point of reality, because
Mhm.
that's a tough decision to make.
Yes, that's a great point, because I was there, but I'm sure there were some things that went straight over my
Mhm.
head because I was,
Yes.
some of it is still very cloudy today. And I'm
Yes.
grateful that there were some other people around me that could help, and I could call some people and talk to them. And the doctor just said this. I had a friend that was a nurse at that hospital at the time, and she would come in and listen to the doctor or sit
Yes.
in, because I knew that I was not sleeping well. I had to go to the doctor myself and get medicine to be able to sleep. And then I still wasn't sleeping with that medicine. So
Mhm.
it's just so many things. That's why I'm saying to the audience that we
Mhm.
have to have this conversation, because when things go awry, you
Yeah.
are not going to be able to be yourself in most
Yeah.
instances. I'm not saying all, but in most instances, you might not be able to function as you normally would mentally. Um,
Mhm.
so that's why these conversations are important. And that was the next question, was why are these conversations important? So that things will go smoother. And I'm
Yes.
sure you guys would like to add something to that, Dr. In, the importance of the conversation.
Again, so that there's clarity, as you alluded to, because you're grieving, you're overwhelmed with emotion. You may not understand something the first or second or third time. It takes time.
Mhm.
And like you said, just I guess coming to an agreement as well is that it is going to be written down, so that when you're in the throes of this overwhelming emotional state, you have a reference point. Say, yes, when I wasn't so overwhelmed, we're going to go with this document. Just
Mhm.
solidifying that fact that that's what you're going to go with, even though
Yes.
you may get confused or overwhelmed when that time comes.
Mhm. Even when you disagree, that's what they
Even
wanted.
Even
We're
when.
going to carry it out.
yeah.
We're going to carry it out. And so hopefully they can sleep at night, because it was a long time before I was able to sleep
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
at night. So And then the other thing is, I didn't know CPR when my husband had his heart attack. So for me, not knowing CPR, mentally, I was blaming myself. You know, what if I knew CPR? Could I have saved his life? And then I ran into another widow whose husband had a heart attack, and her son was a paramedic and administered CPR, and it didn't save him. So, you know, that was able to help me get through that phase. But for months, I was just out of sorts, you know, because what if I knew CPR? Could they have really saved his life? Could it have, you know, had an impact on his brain activity? So, you know, I went through all of that. So I do plan to get CPR certified at some point. That is one of my goals, and I haven't done it yet, but I do plan to do that because that was major in my mind, even still to this day. So would you share again, where would people get these forms to complete?
So you can get a copy printed offline on Google. You know, Google's so many people's friends these days. In addition to that, your doctor's office in the hospital, when you meet with your primary care, you can ask for an advance directive. And a lot of times they ask you if you want one. If you go into the emergency department, you know, advance directive can be provided to you as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know, you know, we're talking about this, as Dr. Indy said, kind of morbid conversation. But I want to end this with a upbeat piece, because Dr. Indy is a health coach, and her goal is to empower people to take care of themselves so that it prolongs a quality of life. So as we prepare to kind of close this conversation out, Dr. Indy, will you share, you know, something with the audience about your book? And I know that you had said you would donate one as a prize or drawing today, but can you just leave them with something as it relates to quality of life and prolonging that?
Sure. Again, I'm an internist, so I take care of men and women, but I tend to connect with the women more because I just happen to be one. we go through the same challenges, you know, across the board, regardless of your ethnicity, the part of the world that you were brought up, raised, and, you know, we have the same issues, concerns, and a lot of that is this superwoman syndrome. It's just a natural tendency for most women to take care of everybody else to their own neglect. So we just leave ourselves to the end. And I try to stress to women as I'm coaching them, and in my book, that self-care, self-love is not selfish, it's essential. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. I was speaking with a woman today on a consultation, and all the things that she was talking about was just so fundamental to my message, that you have to have a holistic plan. You have to take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit. And, you know, I am a Christian. I am a daughter of the Most High God. So everything that I do is centered around my faith. And even if you're not a Christian, the principles are still going to apply, that you have to have a strategic plan. Just, you know, women, they're so good at being the CEOs, the managers, you know, they're managing and scheduling and doing all this stuff. How about you manage and schedule what you need? I'll give you an example. One day, a couple weeks ago, when I was off from work, you know, I was on a prayer call that morning, so I had some spiritual food. I went on a run. I love being outside, getting in touch with nature, time to pray. You know, I was very intentional about eating healthy foods, you know, getting my veggies and fruits and just thinking about it. And I say that, you know, women, men, you know, we have more time now with this pandemic to be more intentional. Even though things are slowly starting to, you know, open up, people aren't just running to the restaurants. So you can be more intentional and give thought to what you're going to eat, how you're going to eat. You're going to look at your emotions and make sure you're not eating, you're not an emotional eater. And that if you really stay present and mindful, because my business is called Mindful Health for Women, but again, for men and women, if you're mindful about what you're doing, if you tune in and you make room for those emotions that make you uncomfortable and you process them instead of turning to food, you know. So I give a lot of practical tips to take care of everything. And the main message is this, that healthy living for men or women, it is more than meets the mind. That's what it says here, more than meets the mind.
Okay.
I think you can see it. And it's an easy read, self-help book, but it's more than meets the mind. It all starts in the mind. And so that's a broad overview of my message and with the book and with my coaching.
That's awesome. And it's funny when we met at WCLK Jazz concert.
Yeah.
I remember when we went to eat and the food was not the healthiest choice. I remember, us kind of having that conversation, or I picked up that she's a healthy eater. So you're right. It is important that we focus on self. Since my husband passed, I was almost 250 pounds, and I am down almost 50 pounds, but I'm not down enough. And so, you know how you get to a place where you're almost stagnant. And so I have to do a better job. I might need you as my coach.
And let me tell you too, let me just say this. I'm not perfect. I believe in treating yourself,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm not such a stickler, so if you see me eating some chocolate, dark chocolate is good for you. Don't say anything.
Dark chocolate.
Yes.
I love chocolate. Yes. So that's good. That's good. Anything that you want to share, Chaplain Griffin, before we close out? Any parting advice or anything that you want to leave with the audience?
As difficult it may be, and it's not one of the top rating conversations, but we at one point or another we have all been exposed to death. Whether it be directly or indirectly, we've been exposed. But it's really important to have the conversation. It is necessary. Have the conversations with your loved ones. If you got to start the conversation with yourself first, asking yourself, what would I want? Do I want cremation? Do I want burial? Would I want life support? And having the understanding of what would allude to that, for the life support, and would there be a quality of life? Have a conversation with your primary care doctor, if you need assistance. But I would definitely encourage everyone that's listening, start a conversation with yourself, have a conversation with your primary care physician, as well as once you get clarity in that area with the doctor, then move to your loved one who you will want to be a healthcare proxy to make decisions on your behalf. Who do you trust in your connection, whether it be your spouse or family member or a good friend that will carry out your wishes? That's what's most important, as well as ended with Dr. Jones, where she said, make sure that they're a willing participant.
Right.
They're willing to,
They're willing to
be a proxy.
Willing to carry that responsibility out to the end, without a doubt.
That's fair.
And Dr. Indy, would you like to leave some parting words with the audience as well?
Yes. Like you said, Shenita, and I'm sorry, Chaplain, your name again?
Griffin. Chaplain Griffin.
Chaplain Griffin. This is an aspect of life. We're born, we have this time to live, and then we die. But we want that transition as much as is in our power to impact how it plays out, which obviously we have a lot of impact. We have the power of prayer, and we can change things, we can prolong things. There's so many different scenarios. So, God allows us to do some things, but let's think about doing things in a way that is not going to cause undue stress, undue stress on your body, which affects your health mentally, physically, spiritually. So just having that intentionality so that you can live a good, long, healthy life. And when it is your time, you can just close your eyes in peace, and He will say, well done.
Right.
Faithful servant. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Glory. Yes, indeed.
I know I want to hear that when I rest and close my eyes.
I know that's right. I'm working towards that. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the
Amen.
goal. That's the goal. So
And just walking in your purpose. Let me just say that I've been talking a lot to women lately about their purpose, because again, we have all this extra time on our hands, and what is your purpose, and how do you equip yourself and take care of your temple? If your temple isn't well cared for, you can't carry that purpose out, you know. And the fact that you wake up each morning, you're still here, that means your purpose is yet to be complete. And what can you do to enhance your ability to walk in your purpose with peace, joy, love, contentment, you know, that peace that passes all understanding, no matter what's going on, beyond your control. You're just going to have a different perspective than the average person who doesn't have that supernatural peace.
I love it. I'm just honored to have you ladies with me tonight, because you are so full of substance. And I just the holistic, you know, piece that you guys bring, the spiritual piece, the professional piece, just holistic. So I'm just honored to have you all share with the audience tonight on this important topic, that you took time out of your busy schedules, because you could be doing anything, whether it's Dr. Indy, your show that you typically have on Thursdays. Thank you so much for being here in the midst of maybe, you know, you're not feeling your 100%, that you're here. And Chaplain Griffin, you could be spending time with your baby, your family. So I just thank you guys for being a servant, because we are here to serve others. And you're right, our purpose, we have to carry that out. And so I'm just grateful to know you, to have connected with you, Dr. Indy, at the WCLK concert that day. And I'm grateful for it.
The parking lot, I think it was the parking lot of the Simpson Street Church of Christ. Shout out to Simpson Street. Anybody watching from there? I'm a
yes.
And we had the jazz lady. It was really nice.
Yes, it was a good night. You know, overall, when I can walk away and have met quality people that I stay in touch with, it was a good night.
Yes,
and the whole experience was a good one. So I knew when I met you that I would always be in touch with you. I knew that. Yes, very intentional about that. Yes. And to you, Chaplain Griffin, when I spoke to Roz and she said, I have the person for you. And she was so excited to connect us. And I'm so grateful that she felt comfortable enough trusting me with you. Yes. So I'm grateful. And I hope that the people that we've talked to this evening will walk away more encouraged and motivated, empowered. So I want to thank you all, you both. And thank you again, Dr. Indy, for the donation. And we'll share that a little bit later on the page.
Okay.
And you guys have an amazing rest of your evening.
You
and
too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for following your vision and being led by the Holy Spirit. And that's why we're here this evening. So thank you again as well, following your heart and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. The humble beginnings.
Yes.
Yes.
Sharing your story. To God be the glory.
Yes. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I hope that conversation was wonderful. I hope that it was informative. I hope that it was inspiring. I hope that it was motivating. I hope that it will help you take the time to have the discussion about your advanced medical directive and putting it in place. And I know I said that I would, share a little bit of mine, but here's just a snippet. It says, if upon my death, any of my tissue or organs would be of value for transplantation, I freely give my permission to the donation of such tissue or organs for transplantation only. Any organ donation or associated process shall be authorized only if there is no charge or assessment to my estate, my heirs, or my insurance company. So that's a piece because I'm an organ donor. And so I wanted that piece in my advanced medical directive. But have the conversation with your doctor, have the conversation with your family members, and let this be a part of getting your affairs in order. The question is my house in order? Is my house in order? Is my house in order? If it's not, take the time and put it in order. I want to thank you guys again, as always, for joining, for liking, for sharing. Please tune in weekly for the mini series. Next week, we're supposed to come back because it was such a great conversation about For the Love of Money next Thursday with the Gants. And so hopefully you guys will join us again. Please remember to make time for what matters. And we've talked about that tonight. I mention that every week, that your family members will be grateful that you did. Let's prepare for the inevitable, because we all know that we will have to transition at some point in our life. So let's embrace the fact that we will depart this earth one day. Questions are emailed to me each Wednesday by Wednesday night prior to the show on Thursday. Questions, please continue to send those questions in, because they are truly, truly an asset to the show. And we want to answer your questions. Please consider getting a copy of Is Your House in Order? I will also post Dr. Indy's book as well, a link to her book as well. So please support the authors. Please take the time to take care of you and your family members, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And again, thank you to those who like and share the post. Your names will be entered into a virtual drawing next week, and we will choose someone as a winner. So thank you again for joining us this evening. And we hope that we have been a blessing to you. Have a good night.